everyone. I'm very glad to greet all of you here on the BioAro Live podcast event, where we can ask, listen, and learn together. I would want to encourage everyone to type their question in the chat, as good things comes with curiosity. Allow me to introduce our amazing speaker today, Raman. She is a mother, a philanthropist, a dietitian, and a chief health plan officer. With 20 years of experience, she's a visionary leader of longevity and health span optimization, a founder of Mia Medical Aesthetic Clinic and BioAro Corporation. She is inspiring to open the secrets of longevity through her lifestyle, genetics, and microbiome analysis. As of a personal interest, what inspired you to start
This
all
is
your
not
longevity
easy
projects?
topic to start
It's not
talking
easy
with.
topic to
And
touch.
how does BioHealth manage to incorporate all the
incorporate
science
all
and the
available
medical
science and
knowledge
medical
to help
knowledge
patients?
to help?
Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me, Alina, and thank you for the lovely introduction, and welcome to everybody to this podcast today. That is a fantastic question. My journey coming to precision medicine, precision health, longevity actually stems from just wanting to make a difference. As a dietitian, we've always known that one size doesn't fit all. We look at different recommendations, however, those recommendations don't necessarily suit every single person. So we're at an age in science and healthcare where we're actually able to look at an individual's genetics, their microbiome, and provide recommendations specific to that person. We're all unique, so why wouldn't our lifestyle modifications be as well?
Okay, that's an amazing question. So you're a founder of the BioGut Clinic as well. So if you can debrief me more what BioGut Clinic does and how does microbiome test actually help our health and it related to our gut health too?
Absolutely. So, living in a time of lots of convenience and stress and busy lifestyles also leads way to often what we call dysbiosis in our gut microbiomes. When we start to get that, sometimes it may lead to conditions such as IBS or irritable bowel syndrome. So irritable bowel syndrome is a condition that affects the gut and affects what we call the gut-brain axis. So there's a nerve that runs from our gut to our brain called the vagus nerve, and this nerve, sometimes the signals that are going through the gut to the brain may get cross-linked and might fire too much or too little, leading to symptoms of constipation, diarrhea, abdominal pain, discomfort, and really not knowing which symptom is going to come. So when that's lumped together, it can often be seen as something called irritable bowel syndrome. And we find that IBS actually tends to affect women more than men, and it has kind of this deviation to happen to women or men around the ages of 25 to 55, so when they're the prime of their life, prime of their careers, and now they're having to figure out how to manage this irritable bowel syndrome, which takes a lot from their life. So we understand that when it comes to IBS, it's very multifactorial. It's not just about the foods you eat. It's about your mental health. It's about the foods you eat. It's about your activity. It's about managing you medically. So we've created something called BioGut, which is a 90-day virtual journey that allows people to really understand their gut health, but we are taking a precision medicine approach. So during this 90-day journey, not only are you working with clinical psychologists, dietitians, kinesiologists, but you're also getting 2 microbiome samples so that we can work on that dysbiosis to help alleviate symptoms.
So help me to understand. Basically, with the microbiome assessment, we're able to identify whether the patient has dysbiosis or no and how it affects the health.
Absolutely. So we can see, what bacteria they might have too much of, too little of, what's abundant, what's not abundant, and how we can then cater those bacteria or work on changing those bacteria to a more balanced state through exercise, through medications, through like probiotics, prebiotics, postbiotics, through nutrition, through mental health, all of that combined together.
That's awesome. I'm grateful to learn more about your career path and idea of precision health. Now with the holiday season, more and more food and alcohol come into our life. I believe many people are curious here on how to manage overeating and alcohol intoxication. I'm also curious, as you mentioned about microbiome before, how it can be affecting our microbiome.
Okay, absolutely. So with the holidays coming, of course, it's a time to indulge. And we all do indulge quite a bit. So what I like to say, it's not what you're doing from December to January, but it's what you do from January to December. But still, during this time, we really want to focus on balance, and we really want to try to keep that balance throughout our days, throughout our meals. And so there's little tips and tricks that we can try to do to help continuing promoting a healthy gut microbiome. So if you are going to have alcohol, maybe have a drink and then have a glass of water in between. Kind of limit the intake as much as you can and try to keep balanced. If you're going to late night parties, trying to have a healthy snack before you go to the party so that you're not overly hungry and overdoing it. Listening to your body. That's a really big one. When you're hungry, have something to eat when you're full. Even though it looks so appetizing, listen to your body and take a little bit of a break. Another easy trick is if you're at a buffet table, try not to hang around the buffet table.
Okay.
Take your snack and go sit somewhere else, go mingle somewhere else, because when the food is right in front of you, it's easy to keep nibbling without being mindful of what you're eating. So lots of different things. Yes?
Take a plate and go.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Actually, I have like a question because sometimes people take charcoal and in order to like have more resistance towards the alcohol. Does it work or not?
No,
really?
there's not a lot of evidence for that. We don't really know what the side effects of something like charcoal would be. What would be better is to really try to do balance. And remember that, if you've had a day where you've maybe eaten too much or a couple days, then for the next few days, focus on, cleansing your body through healthy eating. Focusing on more fresh vegetables and fruits, trying to get more foods with antioxidants, focusing on more whole fruits, less processed foods to help your body naturally detoxify.
You mentioned about fruits with antioxidants.
Yes.
Can you give some example because I don't have on top of my mind
Yeah,
fruits with antioxidants.
absolutely. So antioxidants are found in many of our foods, but what really helps is to look for those foods that are very colorful. So the more colorful and bright your vegetables and fruits are, the more the nutrients they're going to have. So going for the reds, the oranges, the greens, the purples, so like berries and cantaloupes and dark broccolis and spinaches and asparagus, really looking for the color. Eating that rainbow, which not only helps with getting extra nutrients, but also helps to increase the diversity in our microbiome.
Okay.
Which leads to lots of benefits for our gut.
We actually have a question, and I would encourage everyone who's listening to ask the question on the chats as well, as we are live podcast, right? So there is a question: is there food that increase risk of the IBS, and can children have IBS too, related to our topic about the IBS?
Absolutely. So IBS can affect any age group, and foods, there are certain, it's not necessarily only foods, but there are certain lifestyle factors that can certainly increase our risk of IBS or dysbiosis. So the more processed foods, the more convenience foods we're having, the higher the chances of dysbiosis occurs, which then leads to some of these symptoms occurring. And when we look at our lifestyle today, our diets today, we are seeing a lot of processed foods, a lot of packaged, prepackaged, less and less of the whole foods. If you look at something like even in kids, it's easy to go buy a fruit roll-up versus giving the actual fruit, which takes the same amount of time to eat, but has way more nutrition than having something like, fruit gummies or fruit roll-ups or things like that.
Yeah, definitely. There is also one question about the vitamins and supplements, which may increase risk of the IBS. Is it true or not?
So when we're looking at vitamin and mineral supplementations, I'm a big believer in being a food-first dietitian. I think we really need to focus on eating foods before we focus on supplementation. Does supplementation increase the risk? No, there's not a lot of evidence that shows that, but if you are deficient in certain nutrients and certain vitamins and minerals, that may exacerbate symptoms of IBS. So we really want to focus on getting kind of a holistic amount of foods, a good variety. But sometimes individuals with IBS, what happens is they start to restrict their intake because they may feel really upset or bad when they're eating a certain food, and their diet becomes very, very restrictive. And so that can lead to deficiencies, then which can exacerbate symptoms. So we need to work on rebuilding that resistance, which comes back to the gut microbiome.
Yeah.
Shifting gears to the everyday lifestyle. Many people rely on coffee and chocolate in their stressful routines. What advice would you have for finding a good alternatives?
Absolutely, great question. And I don't think it's so much about replacement as it is about balance. And this is where genetics come into play. You know, as a dietitian, we've always been taught that there's certain guidelines you follow, and if somebody's got certain conditions, you may recommend, you know, a certain amount of caffeine, and you don't want them to go over, say, 400 milligrams, which is roughly 3 to 4 cups per day. But if we start to look at a person's genetics and their genes, they may have certain genes that actually affect how quickly or slowly their body metabolizes caffeine, which in turn would change that recommendation. So it's not so much about eliminating or not having, but it's about balancing and really looking at, because caffeine or coffee can actually have some good benefits for your microbiome. It does do a little bit of anti-inflammatory if had in moderation. Things like chocolate, dark chocolate tends to have polyphenols, which also may have a little bit of benefit. So it's not that all you should be eating is chocolate, dark chocolate, and, you know, drinking coffee. It's about how do you incorporate them as part of a balanced diet and lifestyle.
Okay, that's great. So let's say if we will have any kind of a person who had a prescription that's like, oh, we are not recommending you to take coffee based on your, let's say, genetic predisposition, and that person really loves it.
They need some sort of substitute. So, you know, there's chicory root, which you can often get. It's tends to be lower in the caffeine, but still has that kind of coffee taste.
Okay,
so that bittery taste is called chicory root, and it's actually a natural prebiotic. So prebiotics are foods that actually feed the healthy bacteria in our gut. Chocolate, dark chocolate, is also a prebiotic. So these foods actually get down to that large intestine and can help feed some of the healthy bacteria.
Okay, quantity. We have actually pretty many questions in here. That's amazing. I'm great that. Okay, how quality meal should take every time? I'm not entirely sure what that question meant, but probably I will elaborate. So, what about the quality of meal that we need to take every time? So what is the balanced meal that probably every individual need to have and incorporate in their day-to-day life?
Absolutely. So what we want to do is our guts need rest. Just like we need rest, so does our gut to help it to, you know, grow and diversify and just get some balance in there. So I always suggest that try to give your gut at least 12 hours of rest. So that trying to eat in a window of 12 hours. So and then making that window kind of be stopped around 7 p.m. so you're not having a lot of late night eating, which is quite disruptive for our gut. Focusing on more whole foods and trying to incorporate balance in every meal. So, you know, instead of having one large meal or skipping one meal and eating extra at the other meal, balance your intake throughout the day through small, more frequent meals, and at each of those meals, really focus on balance and try to incorporate less processed and more whole foods. One of the biggest things we see in the North American diet is a lack of diversity. We tend to focus on 3 or 4 foods or fruits or vegetables and just keep rotating those same ones into our diet. So really focus on variety. We have so many different food choices to choose from, so trying to get different ones as often as we can.
Okay, so when you talk about diversity, does it mean protein? Because I know some people are vegetarian, so protein, carbohydrates, right, and then fiber. So how big of a role fiber plays actually?
Huge. So when I'm talking balance, I kind of think of my plate, and I divide my plate into 4 sections. So each section is what I try to fill. So in one section, I want those carbohydrates or whole grains, which are those fibers. In one section, I want to get some form of protein, and a lot of research is showing us that as we increase our plant-based protein, that's going to help more with diversity, and it tends to be more anti-inflammatory. So really trying to get more plant-based proteins into our diet. And then half of your plate should be vegetables and fruits, and really looking for color, really going for those colorful ones. So fiber plays a very big role. It gives us that feeling of fullness. And there's certain special fibers called prebiotic fibers, and these prebiotic fibers are the ones that actually can make it down to the gut and feed the healthy microbiome.
Okay. We have a question related to our previous conversation about the coffee, and I believe it's not only related to coffee. Sometimes when we take, let's say, a drink or milky drink, I would specify that it can be any kind of like the oat milk, regular milk, almond. I'm not talking about like all the kinds, but you drink it and you feel bloated. You feel like you're full already, right? So you don't really have food anymore. And I understand that this is not entirely healthy, but what would be like a suggestion in order to like balance it?
So if a person is finding that they're bloating after a meal or after certain foods, I would highly suggest that they do get a gut microbiome test done, because perhaps there's a bacteria in there or something in their microbiome that's a little bit out of balance, that's not able to help with the digestion of that particular food. So then we can work and see how to incorporate, or we know that individuals who have lactose intolerance show very specific gut microbiome profiles. Actually, certain bacteria tend to be more elevated in them than in others. So that's where those kind of tools come into place and become more precise for each individual.
Okay, that's amazing. Thank you everyone for your questions. Those are like gorgeous. So I'm glad that we were able to incorporate, and they're so meaningful. I'm learning a lot. So, well, we also had like a couple questions from before, and people asked. So,
Thank you. Following the lead in genetics and irritable bowel syndrome, we have a couple people ask the question about polycystic ovary syndrome and its relationship to the diet and microbiome. PCOS inhibitors are linked to overweight and many other health concerns. So let's say a person is diagnosed with PCOS or diabetes. Is there anything which should be incorporated into their diet in order to minimize the symptomatics? And does microbiome play a role here?
So, PCOS or PCOS is something that affects many, many women. 6 to 20% of women, are affected by polycystic ovary syndrome. And you're right, it does often lead to excess weight gain. It can lead to excess hair growth. It can lead to insulin resistance. So there's a lot of risk factors that come with PCOS. When we look at the microbiome, we do see that there is an elevated, what we call firmicutes, and a decreased bacteroids in their gut microbiome. So when we see that, we know that the way they're eating can certainly have a role on that, as well as their exercise, their mental health. So we would really focus on lifestyle, focusing more on how we can reduce those firmicutes, increase those bacteroids to help their body process their nutrition better and help focus on some of those symptoms.
will the probiotics that you mentioned before be helpful in this
For
case?
some cases, those probiotics would be. So probiotics are very specific to symptoms. It's not beneficial just to take a probiotic. So if you have a particular symptom, there's certain probiotics that will actually help alleviate those symptoms. What we really want to focus on is those prebiotics or probiotics through food can also be another way to help bring that diversity into our gut microbiome.
That's great. So basically, by balanced diet, fiber that we mentioned
Active
before,
living.
colorful food, active living, this is probably the focus that people need to have when they're, let's say, diagnosed with PCOS, right? And is there any particular advice that people can take for the PCOS? Because let's say that people are active, but then their lifestyle does not really allow them to, let's say, run every day.
Of course,
right?
Of course.
So,
And being active doesn't mean that you have to go to the gym or you have to run every day. Being active means incorporating active living into your lifestyle. You know, when you're going shopping or grocery shopping, instead of driving around to find that closest spot, park as far as you can and get the extra walk in. You know, instead of taking the grocery cart right to the car, if you can carry some of those bags and get a little bit weight-bearing activity, do that. If there's an option to take the stairs instead of the escalator or the elevator, it's incorporating active living into your lifestyle on a daily basis. If you can go to the gym and you can work that in, that's wonderful. But research shows us that even small bouts, 10 minutes at a time, up to 30 minutes a day or more, can be beneficial when we're looking at health span and longevity.
Okay. I'll better advise it to my friends. And myself as well, because I'm a very lazy person. I usually park right in front.
Right, so there's some little tips and tricks that you can do.
Yeah, little tips and tricks to me too. I feel guilty. And then I'm trying to go to the gym.
Yeah, that's amazing. Like if we can carve that time out, that's fantastic. But everything we do has a positive impact on our lifestyle. So even if we're out in a restaurant and we're eating a meal, if we can add one positive thing into that meal, reduce the portion of something, choose something grilled over deep fried, every choice we make is going to have a positive impact.
Okay. That's an amazing thing. I definitely use the advice of carrying my bags to the car, as it's a very good solution. I don't do it. I usually use my brother in order to do it for me.
Continuing with genetic predispositions, we all want to lead long and happy life, but there are heritable autoimmune disorders such as vitiligo or rheumatoid arthritis. Can diet influence the progression of those? Or is there any chance of anti-inflammatory diet existing?
Absolutely. So when we're looking at autoimmune disorders, quite often it is, anti-inflammatory foods can help somewhat, for sure. I mean, of course, there's a role of the medical in that as well, but from a lifestyle perspective, active living and trying to choose foods that help limit the inflammation are always a positive thing. So when we're looking at that, we're looking at less processed foods. The more processed a food is, the more inflammatory it is. Things like red meat tend to be more inflammatory, so trying to incorporate more plant-based foods into the diet. Looking for more whole foods, getting lots and lots of fresh vegetables and fruits and back to that variety. Looking at things like nuts and seeds and lentils and legumes, that whole Mediterranean way of eating, where you're getting that variety and wholesomeness into the foods. There is a lot, like when you go into the grocery store, a good tip is to try to stick to the perimeters of the grocery store, because that's where you're going to get your vegetables and fruits, your fresh, your fresh foods, your grains. It's in the aisles where all the canned and the boxed and the processed foods are. Limiting things like deli meats, which tend to be very high in sodium, very high in fat, and tend to be very, very processed. So trying to stick to foods and more slow cooking versus fast foods.
Well, actually, my another question is, so let's say I'm taking the food which is related, like it's just bought chicken from Costco, right? But then I have a lot of spices that I'm using on top of it. Is there any spices or any kind of like processed dry things which can cause an inflammation that people
No. So spices are the variety of life. And when we look at increasing plant-based diversity, it's not just about beans and lentils. People hear, plant-based protein, and the first thing that comes to their minds is, oh, I don't like beans, I don't want to eat beans. But plant-based diversity means all your herbs, all your spices, these are all plants. It means nuts, seeds, legumes, beans, lentils. There's so much variety. Our herbs and spices are a great way to increase diversity in the diet. So if you're bringing a chicken from Costco home, a whole chicken, the more variety of spices you put on there, whether it be, parsley or cilantro or garlic, they're all going to help increase the diversity of your microbiome.
Okay.
It's just the sodium that you want to watch.
Okay, that's a very good insight. Sodium, and what about the chili powder? That's my question, because
it's totally fine.
Totally fine.
Yeah, absolutely. As long as you can tolerate it and it's not, nothing in excess is good. Everything should be in a balance, moderation into what you can tolerate.
Oh, with chili powder is probably having a lot of effect in people's life. So that's amazing to hear. Well, that's great to know that spices are not the issue, because I tend to put like a lot of them on top.
The more the variety, there's so many spices, cinnamon, garlic, cloves, peppercorns, the ginger, the list goes on, turmeric, the list just goes on, cardamom. The more variety you put in, the better. These are all different plant-based foods.
Okay, we have some more questions.
Okay.
So the last one that I have, is it true that that raw vegetables are bad for your gut?
So no, raw vegetables are not bad for your gut. Every vegetable, whether it be raw or cooked or processed a little bit, is going to have different benefits. And when we process that vegetable, the nutrient composition changes, and sometimes it makes it better and sometimes it reduces it.
Mm-hmm.
But raw vegetables, for some people, are a little bit harder to digest. So when they're having raw vegetables, if their microbiome is not used to them, or they don't have the right bacteria to help digest them, they may feel more symptoms of bloating or gas or discomfort. So then what we need to do is we need to slowly reintroduce them in small quantities to help redevelop some of those microbiomes or those bacteria to help with that digestion. But for tomatoes, for example, when you have tomato in its raw form, it has certain nutrients. But when we can those tomatoes or we cook those tomatoes, we release the antioxidant lycopene and it becomes more concentrated, which is more beneficial. So it's about having a variety of vegetables and fruits in all their various forms.
Mm-hmm. So one day salad, another day baked vegetables. That's the answer.
Absolutely.
We have another question. What foods are good if you have arthritis that are narrowing and want to blood flow and oxygen circulation to improve?
So that's a very specific question, but overall we're looking at heart health. And when we're looking at heart health, there's two things that really impact it, which is fat and fiber. The more fiber we can increase, and reducing certain fats can help with heart health. And coming back to more of those plants, more greens, more vegetables, more fruits, and that balance. So it's really a reduction in fat and an increase in fiber through variety.
So given that reduction in fat, increased fiber, let's say a person cannot cook. I mean, because of the workload, working 3 jobs, elaborating, studies, everything, right? Cooking time is not for them. But they want to incorporate a good lifestyle into their life. So what would be a suggestion? Of course, like ordering food every day is a solution, but not all food, according to your words right now, it's definitely true. The processed food is definitely out of the question. What would be a good suggestion for them? Is there any food choices that they can order?
Absolutely. There's lots of different ways of kind of tackling that. And it's probably the reality of many of our lives where we're not having time, we're busy working, taking care of kids, driving them to this activity, that activity, taking care of parents, whatever the case may be. There's many things that tug us in different directions in our lives, and our food habits or our eating tends to get the lowest priority. You get home at 5:30 and it's like, okay, what's for dinner? Where to begin? It's easier just to order a pizza or takeout than now figure out what to eat.
I feel it.
Okay. So one of the easiest and best things to do is focus on meal planning. I find that when people actually understand or figure out what they want for the week, and they do a little bit of prep in advance, can really help take away some of that stress. Another idea is there's lots of different companies like Good Food Box and these other companies that will provide you the pre-cut or the ready-to-use vegetables and recipes so that the stuff is on hand and ready to go. The trick to it all is being prepared. It's when we're not prepared that we get thrown off. So a little thing that I do personally is when I get my groceries, first of all, I do meal plans so I know exactly what meals I'm making for the week. But then when I buy my groceries, I don't just put them away. I actually wash and cut them so they're ready to go, which takes away 50% to 60% of the headache of cooking.
Okay, my question is, so let's say that's something that I do, and I know many people does. When we take fruits, we cut them and then we place it in a freezer. Does freezer affect the quality of the vegetables?
No. In fact, if you're buying frozen fruits and vegetables from the grocery store, you will often get a more ripe product because these frozen foods, these vegetables and fruits are picked at their ripeness and frozen right away.
Okay.
So no, it doesn't matter. Again, it comes to variety. What's more important is actually getting those vegetables and fruit, whether they be in frozen form or fresh form. It's incorporating them into your diet.
Okay, good to know. Frozen food it is. Fruits. Balance. But I know like that sometimes, like in the vegetables, we are looking, and in the fruits too, we're looking for the vitamin C, which is a very important part of our lives. So if we buy a fresh fruit or a frozen one, any speculations? Up to you. Is which one would be like better?
So vitamin C is a water-soluble vitamin, and you lose your vitamin C if you were to boil the foods and throw the water out. So as long as those vegetables and fruits are not pre-blanched before they're frozen, you wouldn't be losing the nutrients in them.
Okay, that's good to know.
And it's good to have some frozen vegetables on hand in your freezer that you can throw into your foods. Spinach, broccoli, peas, carrots. It's easy to have them, and when you're making something, throw in a handful, a cup, and it immediately increases the diversity.
That's great. I'm actually dressed up like a vegetable today. I was assuming that I'm a Christmas tree, but apparently not with today's conversation. I'm like a broccoli. So we have one more question. How quickly can your gut health rebound after change in diet? For example, if someone eats takeout pre-made food, and a lot of them start eating whole foods as a new diet. Okay, let me elaborate the question. So the person had a lot of pre-processed food before, and then they're immediately shifting to the very healthy diet. Is there anything that they can expect?
So they may not feel it right away, but your microbiome can change within 6 hours. Like it starts changing very quickly. What I recommend is when somebody gets a gut microbiome done, is to really focus on those changes for 4 to 6 weeks, even up to 8 weeks, and then get it tested again. So myself, what I've done different stints of 6 weeks at a time where I'm concentrating on a few things in my diet to see what changes they make on my gut microbiome. Before I even get tested, physically and mentally, I can start feeling changes. So for example, as I increased my prebiotic fibers or certain changes in my diet, I noticed my cravings diminished. Even before I retested, I noticed my sleep patterns changed. So I noticed my skin changed. So you'll start seeing some of those changes, but I would wait about 6 weeks to 8 weeks before getting retested. But you will start to see changes in your lifestyle.
Okay. Well, but one thing that I have in my mind, right? You're rapidly changing from the pre-processed, very, I would say, fiber-less food to the food which has a lot
Higher
of the fiber, right? Will it contribute to to your gut?
100%. So when you go to the gym and you go do a hard workout and the next day you're super, super sore, right? Your body's reacting to that. So you have two choices. At that point, you say, I'm not going to work out again because I was too sore. Or you say, you know what? I'm going to work through this. And over time, your body starts to get stronger and stronger and you're not as sore. So it's the same thing with your gut. You don't want to increase your fiber to 25 grams in one day, but as you start to change your diet, increase the fiber, you may notice a little bit of bloating or maybe a little bit of gas, but slowly working through that, because that's your body's response, just saying, whoa, this is something new. I don't know what to do with this. I need some time to figure out how to adjust to this. Even myself, I thought I ate fairly well when I started changing my diet and I started increasing certain foods. I noticed changes in, my gut health and this, and as I persevered, those symptoms went away.
Mm-hmm.
So it's about go slow and steady, not to overdo it, but anticipate that it's going to take some adjustment.
Good to know that for the people, in case we will start rapidly changing our lifestyle and what I do, I'll need to anticipate something similar to the gym when we will have consequences of our laziness. So better not have that We're steadily exercising. We have actually more questions, and I'll start with the bottom one. What is the best diet to re-establish a balanced microbiome after antibiotic treatment?
So we know that antibiotics, the role of antibiotics is to kill the bad bacteria when we have a bacterial infection. But in the process of that, often they will wipe out some of our good bacteria as well, giving an opportunity for some of these bad bacteria or these pathogenic bacteria to flourish, leading us to have diarrhea or uncomfortable gut symptoms. So what we want to do at that time is trying to reestablish some of those healthy microbes back into the microbiome. So certain probiotics would be helpful, diet-based probiotics, things like kefir, yogurt, which would help reintroduce some of those healthy bacteria back in.
Okay, we have one more question. Sometimes we do reheat the food which was cooked 7 hours before, for example, right? And is reheating will somehow contribute to the food quality?
Always having fresh food is better, but we live in a time in society where that's not possible.
Yes.
So, as long as you're not overheating too much, you're doing small amounts, it doesn't affect the quality that much.
Wow, amazing to hear that our lifestyle changes actually can bring a benefit to those with genetic predispositions. For our female listeners, some are curious if there any diet to reduce the effect of menopause in the body.
Absolutely. So menopause is a change in a woman's life for sure. Lots of hormonal changes which do have an impact on multiple areas, from weight to food to heat, temperature. There's so many things that are affected, distribution of body weight, so many things change. Things like the estrogen levels dropping, affecting bone health. So there's so many different facets. Something that may benefit people when they are going through menopause is not doing a gut microbiome, but also looking at a vaginal microbiome. Because inside the vaginal area, that does change with the hormones, and there might be some dysbiosis there that may help in terms of correction. But again, focusing on lifestyle. Quite often when women do hit menopause, they continue to eat the same way they did, or they continue the same exercise routine, but their needs have changed. So it's great to meet with a registered dietitian or with a health professional to see how they can adjust their lifestyle accordingly.
Okay, well, we probably may be able to elaborate this topic, and then we'll have a board discussion with actually many specialists, such as psychologists, you as a dietitian,
absolutely.
and maybe we'll have some more specialists joining. So if you guys are curious, please join us. We'll be very grateful to meet with you. And then we will be coming back to one more question, is that what food had satisfactory amount of magnesium?
So when we're looking at magnesium, it does tend to be more protein-based foods. A lot of your nuts and seeds, some of your eggs and things are higher amounts of magnesium, but particularly nuts and seeds and lean proteins tend to be higher in the magnesium.
What about some of my question, according to what you told it, seeds and nuts, there's this little packages of nuts with salt, so they have sodium in there too. Is it a good contribution, or sodium is actually can cause some of the issues?
But we do want to limit sodium as much as we can. We do get sodium naturally from our foods, and we cook with sodium. So if you can choose the nuts that are unsalted, because in your diet you will get sodium from many other sources. So if you have no choice, that's one thing. But if you do have a choice to choose between an unsalted or salted, trying to go for the unsalted. Or if you are choosing the salted, maybe mixing in some unsalted to kind of dilute the effect of the sodium.
Okay. Actually, from my science background, I know that sodium, we have receptors in our tongue, which responsible for the satisfaction.
And that actually plays a genetic role as to if we respond more to salt or sweet.
Exactly. So they are actually triggering our satisfactory receptors, right? So will reducing the salt intake affect our mood, or is it like not the question that we can elaborate?
It's hard to elaborate on that question. I think what it comes down to is really overall the North American diet is extremely high in sodium. We probably get 3 teaspoons of added or sodium in our diet daily, where our requirements are about 1 teaspoon. And most of that sodium is not coming from naturally from our foods, it's coming from processed foods or added sodium. So I think if you choose more whole foods often, you're naturally going to reduce the sodium without even thinking about it to the amounts that your body needs. And one thing that's very important that we didn't talk about that I'll just leave with is with the microbiome, with fiber, is really our fluid intake is very important. So ensuring that we are getting adequate amounts of water and fluids, healthy fluids into our diet.
That's definitely an issue because for me, for example, I am struggling with taking a plain water, right? If there will be a juice and a water, I will be like, I can drink like a bit of a cup of the water and then I can drink like, I don't know, a huge glass of juice.
So we don't, juice is not as beneficial to the microbiome because of the high sugar content. It's actually eating the fruit. So we always suggest to eat the food rather than drink it. But there are things you can do to your water. Things like you can carbonate it, try different temperatures, throw in fresh fruits in there for flavor, lemon, lime, herbal teas. So there's lots of ways to help increase our water intake.
Actually, about throw some things, can honey help?
So again, honey is a sugar. It may be a more natural form of sugar, but it's still sugar to our bodies. There are certain honeys, like the Manuka honey, that does have some prebiotic effect or probiotics in there. So
Noted.
Yeah.
Manuka honey.
Yeah, it has to have a certain number on there, but that is one of the only honeys that does actually benefit the microbiome.
Okay.
Wow, time flies. I wasn't expecting that. It's already 6 and more. How about to bring this topic for our upcoming discussions? I believe people will be glad to hear more about the menopause and the diet related to it. So, ladies and gentlemen, as we come to an end of our time together, I'm filled with gratitude for the opportunity to share this moment with such an incredible audience. Today has been more than just a collection of the words. It has been a journey of ideas, insights, and collective inspiration. In a spirit of unity and shared purpose, let's leave this space with the knowledge that we are not merely individuals, we are a community connected with passion for nutrition and the gut health. Each one of you has contributed today for our discussion. And I want to actually stress your attention that the power to change our lives actually lies within each and every one of us. In closing, thank you for your participation and special thank you to you, Raman, for being the catalyst of our intellectual curiosity. May the insights gained today pave the way for the future discoveries and collaborations. Thank you, and until we meet again in 3 weeks for our new webinar, we will be diving into sports genomics and how our inheritance can bring the effect on our physical capabilities. Thank you very much. We wish you a great new year and a great Christmas, and stay healthy.